The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of Oakwood Children's Home, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors. Lily tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she made her bed with careful precision. At 12 years old, she had mastered the art of being almost invisible, a useful skill in a place where 30 children competed for attention and resources. Lily. Breakfast. Mrs. Wilson, one of the caretakers, called from the bottom of the stairs. Lily grabbed her notebook and hurried down. The dining room buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Younger kids squabbling over cereal, teenagers slouched in their chairs looking at their phones, and staff members trying to maintain some semblance of order. "Did you finish your homework?" asked Min, her roommate, as Lily slid onto the bench beside her. Lily nodded, spooning oatmeal into her mouth. She always finished her homework. School was her escape, her chance to disappear into books and numbers that made sense, unlike the messy reality of being a kid nobody wanted. "Good morning, children," Ms. Rivera said, clapping her hands for attention. The noise dimmed slightly. Ms. Rivera was the director of Oakwood, a woman with kind eyes and permanent worry lines on her forehead. Today, those worry lines seemed deeper than usual. "I have an important announcement," she continued once she had most of their attention. "Tomorrow we'll have special visitors coming to tour the home. Very important potential donors." A collective groan rose from the older kids who had been through this routine before. Special visitors meant extra chores, best behavior, and being put on display like items in a shop window. "I need everyone on their absolute best behavior," Ms. Rivera emphasized, her eyes scanning the room. "Oakwood needs their support if we want to keep our music program and fix the leaky roof before winter." The mention of the music program made Lily look up from her oatmeal. The tiny room with its out-of-tune piano and 3 old guitars was her favorite place in the entire building. She didn't know how to play any instruments properly, but sometimes, when nobody was around, she would sit at the piano and press the keys gently, imagining what it would be like to fill the room with beautiful sounds. After breakfast, Lily joined the cleaning crew assigned to the main hallway. She scrubbed the baseboards until her fingers were red while others polished the wooden banisters and washed windows. "Who's coming tomorrow anyway?" asked Dion, a 14-year-old who had been at Oakwood even longer than Lily. "I heard Ms. Rivera talking to Mrs. Wilson," whispered Zoe, always the source of gossip. "It's some rich businessman, Harrington something. He owns half the buildings downtown." "Victor Harrington," confirmed Mrs. Wilson, who had overheard as she walked by with fresh towels. "And yes, he's very wealthy and very influential. His company is considering making Oakwood their charity project this year." "Why does he want to see us? We're not zoo animals," Dion muttered, but not loud enough for Mrs. Wilson to hear. Lily kept quiet, focusing on her scrubbing. She had learned long ago that adults like this Harrington person rarely noticed kids like her, the ones who weren't especially cute or talented or troubled. She was simply average, and average kids didn't get chosen. The next morning was a frenzy of activity. Staff members rushed around straightening picture frames and arranging fresh flowers donated by a local shop. The older children helped the younger ones with their hair and clothes. Everyone wore their cleanest outfits. "Remember, smile and be polite if spoken to," Ms. Rivera instructed them as they gathered in the common room. "No running, no arguing. And please, for the love of all things good, no mentions of the basement flooding or the broken air conditioning." The sound of expensive tires on gravel silenced everyone. Through the window, Lily saw a sleek black car pull up. The driver stepped out first, opening the door for a tall man in a dark suit that probably cost more than Oakwood's monthly food budget. Victor Harrington entered the building like he already owned it, his eyes critically scanning everything from the slightly peeling wallpaper to the mismatched furniture. Behind him trailed 2 assistants with tablets and a woman who introduced herself as his company's public relations director. "Thank you for visiting us today, Mr. Harrington," Ms. Rivera said, her professional smile firmly in place. "We're honored you're considering Oakwood for your company's community initiative." The man nodded curtly. "Let's see what we're working with, shall we?" His voice was deep and impatient, like someone used to people jumping at his commands. The tour began in the common room, where some of the younger children had been coached to play quietly with educational toys. They looked up with rehearsed smiles as the adults entered. Victor Harrington barely glanced at them before moving on. Lily and a few others had been assigned to the library, arranged in small groups pretending to study or read. She kept her head down as the tour group passed through, but she could feel the businessman's cold assessment of the space. "The books are donated," she heard Ms. Rivera explain. "We try to encourage reading and learning, but our resources are limited." Was all Victor Harrington said before moving on. As the morning progressed, Lily noticed Ms. Rivera's smile becoming more strained. The businessman seemed unimpressed with everything. The dormitories cramped, the computer lab outdated, and the playground a liability issue waiting to happen. By the time they reached the small room designated as their music space, Ms. Rivera was speaking faster, a slight tremor in her voice betraying her nervousness. "Music has been proven to help children develop cognitive skills and emotional regulation," she was saying as they entered the room where Lily and 4 other children waited. They had been told to look engaged with the instruments, even though none of them had formal training. Victor Harrington's eyes landed on the old grand piano in the corner, a donation from a local church that had upgraded its own equipment years ago. The piano was slightly out of tune but still functional. "Does anyone actually play this?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "Well, we haven't had a music teacher for some time," Ms. Rivera admitted. "Budget constraints, you understand. But several children show interest and so it's just gathering dust," Victor interrupted, running a finger across the piano's surface and examining the light coating of dust with distaste. "Typical. Beautiful instrument wasted." Something shifted in the room, a cooling of the already chilly atmosphere. The PR woman looked uncomfortable. One of the assistants coughed softly. Victor Harrington turned, his eyes scanning the children in the room. Lily tried to make herself smaller behind the music stand she'd been pretending to read. "What about these kids? Any hidden talents?" His tone was mocking now, as if the very idea was absurd. No one spoke. The other children looked at their shoes or the walls, anywhere but at the intimidating man in their music room. Then, inexplicably, his gaze locked onto Lily. Perhaps it was because she'd moved slightly, or perhaps it was just bad luck. Whatever the reason, Victor Harrington's full attention suddenly focused on the thin girl with the serious eyes. "You," he said, pointing directly at Lily. "Do you play?" Lily felt her throat close up. All eyes in the room turned to her. She managed a small shake of her head. A smirk spread across Victor Harrington's face. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was watching before he spoke again. "If she plays the piano, I'll adopt her," he jeered, loud enough for everyone to hear. His assistants gave uncomfortable laughs while the PR woman winced visibly. Ms. Rivera's face flushed red. "Mr. Harrington, I don't think—" "No, I mean it," he continued, warming to his joke. "If any of these kids can actually play that piano, really play it, not just plink around, I'll sign adoption papers today." He looked directly at Lily again. "What do you say, kid? Want to try your luck?" The silence in the room was deafening. Lily felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The cruelty of the moment, being singled out, mocked, challenged to perform a skill she didn't have, made her want to run from the room. But then she thought about the music program that might be cut, about the leaky roof, about Ms. Rivera's worried face at breakfast, and something inside her, some small spark of defiance she didn't know she possessed, flared to life. Slowly, Lily stood up. "Lily, you don't have to," Ms. Rivera began, but Lily was already walking toward the piano. Victor Harrington's eyebrows rose in surprise, then settled back into amused condescension. He stepped aside with an exaggerated bow, gesturing to the piano bench. "Be my guest." Lily sat down, her small frame dwarfed by the grand piano. Her hands hovered over the keys as the room held its collective breath. The businessman crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips as he prepared to witness what he clearly expected would be an embarrassing failure. What no one in the room knew, what Lily herself barely acknowledged, was her secret. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, she would sometimes sneak down to the music room. She never played the piano, too afraid the sound would carry through the old building, but she would sit on this very bench, place her fingers on the keys without pressing down, and watch tutorial videos on the ancient shared tablet Ms. Rivera let her borrow. Lily had never played a single note on a real piano, but in her mind, in her dreams, she had played entire symphonies. She took a deep breath and positioned her fingers the way she had practiced countless times in silence. And then Lily began to play. The first note Lily played rang out clear and true, surprising even herself. Her fingers trembled slightly as they found the keys, muscle memory from countless silent practice sessions somehow guiding them. The melody that emerged was simple at first, a children's tune she had seen in a beginner's video. The notes were hesitant but correct, each one gaining a little more confidence than the last. Victor Harrington's smirk froze on his face. His eyebrows drew together in confusion as the girl actually produced music from the dusty piano. It wasn't virtuoso level by any means, but it was undeniably real playing, not random key pressing or childish plunking. Lily kept her eyes on her fingers, too afraid to look up at the adults watching her. She finished the simple tune and, without pausing, transitioned into another piece she had memorized from her late-night video sessions, a slow, melancholy melody that reminded her of rain on windows. The room had fallen completely silent except for the piano. Even the younger children, who usually couldn't stay quiet for more than a minute, seemed spellbound. Ms. Rivera's mouth hung slightly open, her eyes wide with astonishment. As Lily continued to play, something strange happened. The tension in her shoulders began to ease. The fear that had knotted her stomach started to unwind. For the first time, she was making real music, not just imagining it in her head or silently moving her fingers above silent keys. The feeling was intoxicating. Victor Harrington's face had transformed. The mocking amusement was gone, replaced by something harder to read. His arms remained crossed over his chest, but his fingers now gripped his sleeves tightly. "Where did she learn to play?" he asked quietly, not taking his eyes off Lily. Ms. Rivera shook her head, equally baffled. I had no idea she could. We don't have a teacher here." When Lily finished the second piece, she finally dared to look up. The expressions on the adults' faces made her want to shrink into herself again. They were staring at her like she'd suddenly grown a second head. "Who taught you?" Victor Harrington's voice cut through the silence. It wasn't gentle, but some of the cruelty had left it. Lily swallowed hard before answering. "No one, sir." "Impossible," he said flatly. "Someone must have given you lessons." She shook her head. "I watch videos at night, when everyone's asleep." She gestured vaguely toward the tablet charging in the corner of the room. "Ms. Rivera lets me borrow the tablet sometimes. I practice without making sound." The businessman's eyes narrowed. "Show me what else you can play." It wasn't a request, but a command. Lily turned back to the piano, her mind racing through the tutorials she had memorized. She chose a piece that was at the edge of her abilities. A simplified version of a classical piece whose name she didn't know, but whose melody had haunted her for weeks. As she played, her fingers occasionally stumbled or hit wrong notes. Each mistake made her wince, but she pushed through, focusing on the parts she knew well. The music filled the small room, bouncing off the walls and wrapping around the listeners. Victor Harrington moved closer to the piano, watching Lily's hands with an intensity that would have frightened her if she hadn't been so absorbed in the music. Something about her playing seemed to affect him deeply. His breathing had changed, becoming slightly uneven. "That piece," he said when she finished. "Where did you hear it?" Lily looked up at him, confused by the question. "It was in a video called Piano Pieces for Intermediate Beginners. I don't know what it's called." "Nocturne in E-flat major," Victor said, his voice oddly tight. "Chopin." The name meant nothing to Lily, but she nodded politely. The businessman turned abruptly to Ms. Rivera. "I'd like to speak with you privately." "And the girl?" Ms. Rivera looked startled. "Of course, Mr. Harrington, we can use my office." She gestured for his assistants and the other children to leave the room. Lily remained seated at the piano, suddenly terrified. Had she done something wrong? Was he angry that she had actually played, ruining his joke? She wished she could disappear under the piano's heavy wooden frame. Once everyone else had left, Victor Harrington pulled a chair close to the piano and sat down, studying Lily with an unnerving intensity. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Lily Chen," she replied quietly. Something flickered across his face. "Chen," he repeated. "How long have you been at Oakwood?" 7 years, sir. And before that?" Lily looked at Ms. Rivera, who nodded encouragingly. "I lived with my grandmother until I was 5. She got sick and couldn't take care of me anymore." "And your parents?" "My dad left before I was born. My mom died when I was a baby." These were facts Lily had repeated so many times they had lost most of their emotional sting. They were simply the outline of her story, like a book jacket summary. Victor Harrington leaned forward. "Your mother's name?" Do you know it? The question surprised Lily. Grace Chen. The man's face paled visibly. He gripped the armrests of his chair. Was she a musician? Lily nodded slowly. Grandmother said she played piano. In concerts sometimes. I don't remember her. Ms. Rivera looked between them, clearly confused by the line of questioning. Mr. Harrington, may I ask what this is about? He ignored her, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. That piece you just played, the Chopin. Did someone tell you to learn that specific piece? No, sir. I just liked how it sounded in the video. Victor stood up suddenly and walked to the window. His back was rigid as he stared out at the playground where some of the children were now playing. For a long moment he said nothing. 15 years ago, he finally said, his voice so low Lily had to strain to hear him. I attended a concert at Westbrook Hall. It was a showcase of young talent. One pianist played that nocturne. Her name was Grace Chen. Lily felt a strange buzzing in her ears. Ms. Rivera gasped softly. She was remarkable, Victor continued, still facing the window. I went backstage afterward to meet her. We started dating. She was 22, just beginning what promised to be a brilliant career. I was 28, focused entirely on building my business. He turned around, his expression no longer cold or mocking but haunted. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready for a family. My company was just taking off. I told her I couldn't be a father then, that she should. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. She refused. We argued, I left. I never saw her again. The room felt suddenly airless. Lily sat frozen on the piano bench, unable to process what she was hearing. I heard she died in a car accident when her daughter was just over a year old, Victor said, his voice hollow. I read about it in the newspaper. By then I had convinced myself it wasn't my problem anymore, that I'd dodged a bullet. His laugh was bitter and self-mocking. I never even tried to find out what happened to the child. Ms. Rivera had gone very still. Mr. Harrington, are you saying? I don't know, he cut her off. But the timing fits. The name fits. And that piece, he gestured toward the piano. Grace played that at the concert where we met. It was her signature piece. Lily felt like she was watching this scene from outside her body. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to ordinary girls like her. We would need to do a DNA test, Ms. Rivera said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. Before any conclusions are drawn, Victor nodded. Yes, of course. He finally looked directly at Lily again. Would that be all right with you? A simple test. Just to know for sure. Lily didn't know what to say. This morning she had been an unwanted orphan scrubbing baseboards. Now a powerful man who had mocked her just minutes ago was suggesting he might be her father. It was too much to take in. You don't have to decide right now, Ms. Rivera said, gently putting a hand on Lily's shoulder. This is a lot to process. I meant what I said before, Victor said suddenly. Both Lily and Ms. Rivera looked at him in confusion about the adoption, but not as a joke anymore. Mr. Harrington, Ms. Rivera began, her tone cautioning. Even if the DNA test confirms your suspicions, adoption isn't something to rush into. There are processes, home studies, transition periods. I understand, he interrupted. I'm not suggesting taking her home today, but I want to start the process, whether the test is positive or not. He looked at Lily. That is, if she would consider it. Lily felt dizzy with the speed at which her life was changing. An hour ago, this man had been a stranger making cruel jokes. Now he might be her father, might want to take her home. It was like something from one of the books she read, not real life. I think, Ms. Rivera said firmly, that everyone needs time to think. Lily certainly does. She squeezed Lily's shoulder reassuringly. Why don't we all take a step back? Mr. Harrington, I can arrange for the DNA test if Lily agrees. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to continue your tour of the facility. Victor looked like he wanted to argue, but then nodded slowly. Yes, of course. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to look at Lily still sitting at the piano. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for the joke earlier. It was kabunan unkind. After he left, Ms. Rivera knelt beside Lily. Are you okay? Lily nodded automatically, though she wasn't sure if she was okay at all. Her mind was spinning with questions and possibilities. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Ms. Rivera assured her. Not the test, not meeting with him again, nothing. What if he really is my dad? Lily whispered. Ms. Rivera's face softened. Then that's something you'll both need to figure out together. But slowly, carefully, and only if you want to. Lily looked down at her hands, the hands that had just changed everything by playing a piano piece she had never actually touched until today. Hands that might connect her to a mother she never knew and a father she never thought she'd meet. I think, she said slowly, I'd like to know the truth. 3 days had passed since Victor Harrington's visit to Oakwood Children's Home. 3 days of whispers following Lily through the hallways, of curious stares and endless questions from the other children. The story had spread like wildfire. How the mean businessman had challenged her to play the piano as a joke, how she had actually played, and how something strange and serious had happened afterward that made the adults talk in hushed voices behind closed doors. Is it true he's your real dad? Dion had asked her at breakfast the first morning after. Are you really getting adopted? Another child wanted to know. I heard he's a billionaire. Will you get your own swimming pool? A younger boy had asked excitedly. Lily had no answers for them. She felt caught in a strange dream where nothing made sense anymore. Ms. Rivera had tried to shield her from the gossip. But in a place with 30 children and limited privacy, secrets didn't stay secret for long. On the third afternoon, Lily sat alone in the music room, her fingers hovering over the piano keys without pressing them. She had come here every day since the incident, drawn to the instrument that had somehow changed everything. Today, though, she couldn't bring herself to play. What if it had been a fluke? What if she tried again and no music came out? The door creaked open and Ms. Rivera stepped in. There you are, she said with a gentle smile. I thought I might find you here. Lily's hands dropped to her lap. I'm not disturbing anyone, am I? Not at all. Ms. Rivera pulled up a chair beside the piano bench. Actually, I came to talk to you about something important. The DNA test results came back this morning. Lily's heart jumped into her throat. She had almost forgotten about the test, a quick, simple process involving a swab inside her cheek. Ms. Rivera had been there with her when the nurse came to take the sample, explaining everything carefully and reminding Lily multiple times that she didn't have to go through with it if she didn't want to. Already? Lily asked. I thought it would take longer. Ms. Rivera folded her hands in her lap. Mr. Harrington paid extra for expedited processing. He's eager to know. What did it say? Lily's voice came out as a whisper. Ms. Rivera took a deep breath. It confirmed what he suspected, Lily. Victor Harrington is your biological father. The words hung in the air between them. Lily had been preparing herself for this possibility, but hearing it stated as fact still felt like a physical shock, as if the floor had tilted beneath her. Oh, was all she managed to say. How do you feel about that? Ms. Rivera asked gently. Lily stared at the black and white piano keys, trying to sort through the jumble of emotions inside her. I don't know, she admitted. I always thought my dad just didn't want me. And now I know he didn't want me. He said so himself. People change, Lily. The man who left your mother 12 years ago isn't necessarily the same man today. But he didn't try to find me. Not once. The hurt in her voice surprised even herself. Ms. Rivera nodded, acknowledging the pain. That's true. And you have every right to be angry about that. You don't owe him anything. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, nothing. Lily traced a scratch on the piano's wooden frame with her finger. What happens now? Mr. Harrington has asked to see you again. He'd like to take you to lunch this Saturday. Seeing the alarm on Lily's face, Ms. Rivera quickly added, I would come with you, of course, and you can absolutely say no if you don't want to go. What does he want? Lily asked, hating how small her voice sounded. To get to know you, I think, Ms. Rivera said. Beyond that, I don't know. He did mention something about piano lessons. That caught Lily's attention. Real lessons? With a teacher? Yes. He's already donated a significant amount to Oakwood, enough to fix the roof and hire a part-time music teacher for all the children. Ms. Rivera's eyes crinkled with a smile. But he's also offered to arrange private lessons specifically for you, regardless of anything else. Lily's fingers twitched on the piano keys, accidentally pressing one. The note hung in the air between them. Would you like to go to lunch with him? Ms. Rivera asked. It's completely your choice. Lily thought about it for a long moment. Her feelings toward Victor Harrington were complicated, a messy tangle of anger, curiosity, hurt, and a dangerous, unwelcome flicker of hope. She had spent years training herself not to hope for parents to choose her, not to dream of a different life beyond Oakwood's walls. Hope only led to disappointment. But the piano lessons, I think, she said slowly. I would like the lessons, and maybe lunch too, just to see. Saturday arrived with blue skies and a cool breeze that hinted at the coming fall. Lily stood in front of the small mirror in the bathroom she shared with 5 other girls, scrutinizing her appearance. She wore her nicest outfit, dark blue jeans without any holes and a light green sweater that Mrs. Wilson had helped her pick out on their last charity shopping trip. You look lovely, Ms. Rivera assured her as they waited in the front hall for Victor Harrington to arrive. Lily's stomach was tied in knots. She had barely slept the night before, imagining all the ways this meeting could go wrong. What if he was disappointed in her? What if she had nothing to say? What if this was all some elaborate mistake? The sound of tires on gravel made her jump. Through the window, she saw the same sleek black car pull up. But this time it wasn't Victor Harrington who stepped out first, but a woman, tall, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Who's that? Lily whispered to Ms. Rivera. I believe that's Mr. Harrington's mother, Ms. Rivera replied, looking surprised herself. He mentioned she might join us. The woman approached the building with measured steps, her back straight, her expression unreadable. Behind her came Victor, looking less intimidating in casual clothes, dark trousers and a navy sweater rather than his business suit. Ms. Rivera opened the door before they could knock. Mr. Harrington, welcome back to Oakwood, Ms. Rivera. He nodded politely, then gestured to the woman beside him. This is my mother, Helen Harrington. She asked to join us today. I hope that's acceptable. Of course, Ms. Rivera said, though Lily detected a note of caution in her voice. Victor's eyes found Lily, standing slightly behind Ms. Rivera. His expression softened slightly. Hello, Lily. Hello, she managed to reply, her voice barely audible. Helen Harrington stepped forward, her eyes, the same shade of gray as her son's, fixed on Lily's face. For a long, uncomfortable moment, she simply studied her, taking in every detail. Then, unexpectedly, her stern expression cracked and something that might have been a smile touched her lips. You look just like your mother, she said quietly. Lily blinked in surprise. You knew my mom? I met her only once, Helen replied, at a charity event where she performed. She was very talented and very beautiful. An awkward silence fell over the group until Victor cleared his throat. Shall we go? I've made reservations at Giovanni's for noon. The restaurant was unlike anywhere Lily had ever been. Soft music played in the background. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved silently between tables, and the menu didn't have prices listed. Lily sat stiffly in her chair, overwhelmed by the elegant surroundings and the tension radiating from the adults around her. Ms. Rivera, sensing her discomfort, helped her navigate the menu, suggesting the pasta with tomato sauce when Lily whispered that she didn't know what to choose. For the first 15 minutes, conversation was strained and formal. Comments about the weather, the food, the drive into town. Victor seemed unsure how to talk to Lily, directing most of his questions to Ms. Rivera about Oakwood's programs and needs. Helen watched Lily with an intensity that made her want to disappear under the table. Do you enjoy school, Lily? Helen finally asked as their main courses arrived. Lily nodded, carefully twirling pasta around her fork the way Ms. Rivera had shown her. Yes, ma'am. I like reading and science the best. And math? Victor asked, joining the conversation. Are you good with numbers? I'm okay, Lily said with a small shrug. I get A's mostly. She's being modest, Ms. Rivera interjected. Lily consistently achieves the highest grades in her class across all subjects. Her teachers often comment on her focus and dedication. A flicker of what might have been pride crossed Victor's face. That's excellent. And the piano, Helen said, steering the conversation back to the topic that clearly interested her most. How long have you been teaching yourself to play? Lily set down her fork. About a year, I guess. Just watching videos and practicing without making sound. Remarkable, Helen murmured. To develop that level of skill without ever touching the instrument? She turned to her son. You've arranged lessons? Victor nodded. Starting next week. Twice weekly with Professor Chen from the conservatory. Lily's eyes widened. Chen, like my last name? No relation, I checked, Victor said quickly. It's just a coincidence. But he's one of the best teachers in the city. I used to play, Helen said, surprising everyone at the table. Not professionally like your mother, but I was quite accomplished in my youth. She looked at Victor. I still have your father's piano in the music room. It's been gathering dust since he passed. Victor seemed startled by the suggestion in his mother's words. Mother, we haven't discussed— No, we haven't, Helen agreed crisply. But perhaps we should. She turned back to Lily. Would you like to see it sometime? It's a Steinway. Much better than that old thing at your school. Ms. Rivera shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Harrington, I think it's important we not rush ahead too quickly. Lily is still processing a lot of new information. Helen waved a hand dismissively. Of course. No rushing. But her eyes, still fixed on Lily, held a gleam of determination. The rest of the meal passed in a blur for Lily. The adults talked around and about her, discussing music school's proper instruction, the importance of starting young. Victor occasionally tried to include her in the conversation with questions about her hobbies or friends, but it was Helen who dominated the table with her plans and opinions. By the time dessert arrived, a slice of chocolate cake that Lily was too nervous to more than pick it, she felt exhausted from the tension and the weight of expectations suddenly placed on her shoulders as they prepared to leave. Victor hung back, gesturing for Lily to wait a moment while Ms. Rivera and Helen walked ahead to the car. I'm sorry if this was overwhelming, he said, surprising Lily with the genuine concern in his voice. My mother can be intense. Lily nodded, not knowing what to say. The piano lessons are just that. Lessons, he continued. No strings attached. No expectations. He hesitated, then added, I know I have no right to walk into your life after all this time and pretend to be a father, but I would like the chance to try to make up for some of what I did, if you're willing to give me that chance. For the first time, Lily looked directly into his eyes that she now knew she shared. Behind the businessman's polished exterior, she glimpsed something vulnerable and uncertain. I don't know what I want yet, she said honestly. Victor nodded. That's fair. We can take it one step at a time. Starting with the music. As they walked to the car, Lily thought about the piano waiting at Oakwood, the instrument that had somehow connected her to a mother she couldn't remember and a father she never knew she had. One step at a time, starting with the music. That at least was something she could understand. 4 weeks had passed since the lunch with Victor and his mother. Autumn had fully arrived, painting the trees around Oakwood in brilliant reds and golds. For Lily, these weeks had brought changes more dramatic than the shifting seasons. Twice a week, a car would arrive to take her to Professor Chen's studio downtown for her piano lessons. The first time she'd stepped into the spacious room with its gleaming grand piano and walls lined with framed concert programs, she'd nearly turned around and fled. But Professor Chen, a slight man with kind eyes and patient hands, had a way of making her feel at ease. You have a natural gift, he told her during their first lesson, after watching her play the pieces she'd taught herself. But more importantly, you have dedication. That's much rarer. Under his guidance, Lily's playing had improved rapidly. He taught her proper finger positions, how to read sheet music instead of just copying movements from videos, and techniques to bring emotion into each piece. For the first time in her life, Lily felt she might be truly good at something. But the piano lessons weren't the only change. Victor had become a regular presence at Oakwood, dropping by several times a week. Sometimes he would simply watch her practice on the old piano in the music room. Other times he would take her and Ms. Rivera for ice cream or to the bookstore, where he'd insist she choose whatever books she wanted. My father never bought me books, he'd explained once, when Lily hesitated over selecting too many. He thought fiction was a waste of time. Business journals only in our house. A shadow had crossed his face then. I don't want to make the same mistakes. Today was special, though. Victor had arranged for Lily to visit his home for the first time, to see the Steinway piano his mother had mentioned, and to have dinner with both of them. Ms. Rivera would accompany her, of course, but Lily still felt a flutter of nervousness as she packed a small bag with the new dress Mrs. Wilson had helped her choose for the occasion. You don't have to go if you're not comfortable, Ms. Rivera reminded her, standing in the doorway of Lily's room. I can call and cancel, Lily shook her head. I want to see the piano. It was easier to talk about the piano than the complicated feelings she had about visiting the home of the man who was her biological father, a man who was still mostly a stranger. The Harrington house turned out to be not just a house but an estate, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a winding driveway that led to a stone mansion. Lily pressed her face against the car window as they drove through the iron gates, her eyes wide. "It's like something from a movie," she whispered to Ms. Rivera. Victor was waiting for them on the front steps, looking less formal than usual in a light sweater and dark jeans. "Welcome," he said, his usual business-like demeanor softening slightly as he led them inside. "Mother is in the music room, practically counting the minutes until she can hear you play." The entrance hall was high-ceilinged and elegant, with a sweeping staircase and artwork on the walls. Lily tried not to gawk as they walked through several richly furnished rooms. This was where she might have grown up if Victor hadn't left her mother. The thought made her stomach twist with a complicated mix of emotions. The music room was at the back of the house, a bright space with tall windows overlooking the gardens. In the center stood the promised Steinway, a magnificent instrument that made Oakwood's old piano look like a toy in comparison. Helen Harrington rose from a velvet armchair as they entered. In the 4 weeks since their lunch, she had called Oakwood several times to speak with Lily, asking about her progress with Professor Chen and telling her stories about famous pianists. Today she was dressed elegantly as always, but there was an unusual brightness in her eyes. "There she is," Helen said, moving forward to take Lily's hands in hers. "Our little prodigy." Lily flushed at the description. "I'm not a prodigy, Mrs. Harrington. I just practice a lot." "Humility is admirable, but false modesty is not," Helen replied with a small smile. "Professor Chen says you've accomplished in 4 weeks what most students take a year to master." Victor cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should let Lily get comfortable before putting her on the spot, Mother." "Nonsense. She's here to play, isn't she?" Helen turned to the piano, running her hand lovingly across its polished surface. "This instrument has been silent too long. My husband played, you know. Victor never had the patience for it. I had the lessons," Victor corrected her. 12 years of them. "What I lacked was talent," Helen waved this away. "Talent can skip a generation." It clearly went from Grace to Lily. The casual mention of her mother made Lily look up sharply. "Did you ever hear my mom play? Besides that one charity event?" A strange look passed between Helen and Victor. "I attended several of her performances," Helen admitted, after Victor ended their relationship. He didn't know. Victor's face registered surprise. "You never told me that." "You made it clear the subject was closed," Helen replied, a hint of steel in her voice. "But I followed her career. She was remarkable. Could have been world-class if—" She trailed off, glancing at Lily. Well, circumstances intervened. Lily absorbed this information silently. It was strange how hungry she was for details about her mother, a woman who existed for her only in the vaguest memories and in the stories others told. "Would you like to try the piano?" Victor asked, clearly trying to change the subject. Lily approached the Steinway with reverence, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. The ivory was smooth and cool beneath her touch. She sat on the bench, adjusted her posture the way Professor Chen had taught her, and began to play. The sound that emerged was richer, fuller than anything she'd experienced on Oakwood's piano. The notes seemed to resonate through her entire body as she played the piece she'd been practicing all week, a proper version of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, not the simplified arrangement she'd first learned. As she played, Lily forgot her nervousness, forgot the tension between Victor and his mother, forgot everything except the music flowing from her fingers. When she finished, the room was silent for several heartbeats. "Grace played that exact piece the night I first saw her," Helen said softly. "The resemblance is uncanny." Victor's expression was unreadable. "You've made amazing progress, Lily." Ms. Rivera, who had been watching quietly from a chair near the door, smiled proudly. "She practices every spare minute at Oakwood. Mrs. Wilson says she has to remind her to come to dinner." "That's the mark of a true musician," Helen declared. "Now shall we have dinner? I've had cook prepare something special." Dinner was served in a formal dining room with crystal glasses and more silverware than Lily knew what to do with, and she watched Ms. Rivera carefully, copying which fork she used for each course. The food was delicious but unfamiliar. Delicate soups and sauces with French names that Helen pronounced effortlessly. Throughout the meal, Helen dominated the conversation, talking about music schools and competitions Lily might enter, while Victor occasionally tried to steer the discussion to more general topics like Lily's other interests or her friends at Oakwood. "Have you thought more about the adoption?" Helen asked abruptly during a lull in the conversation. Lily nearly choked on her water. Victor's face darkened. "Mother, we agreed not to bring that up tonight. It's been over a month, Victor. These things take time to process. The paperwork alone—" "Helen," Ms. Rivera interjected firmly, "as I've explained before, adoption is a significant legal and emotional process. It's not something to be rushed, especially given the circumstances." "The circumstances," Helen repeated, arching an eyebrow, "are that this child is my granddaughter, and she's living in an orphanage when she could be here, with her family, receiving the best education and opportunities." "Oakwood is not an orphanage," Ms. Rivera corrected, her professional calm showing cracks. "It's a children's home, and Lily has received excellent care there." Of course," Helen said dismissively. "But surely even you must agree that a private home with her biological family would be preferable." "What matters is what's best for Lily," Ms. Rivera replied, "and that involves careful consideration of her emotional well-being, not just material advantages." Lily stared at her plate, wishing she could disappear. They were talking about her as if she weren't sitting right there, deciding her future over dessert. "I'd like to be excused," she said suddenly. Her voice small but firm. The adults fell silent, looking at her in surprise. "Of course," Victor said, standing quickly. "Would you like to return to the music room? Or I could show you the library. You mentioned you like books. The library." "Please," Lily said, grateful for the escape. As Victor led her away, she could hear Ms. Rivera's measured voice addressing Helen, too low to make out the words but firm in tone. The library was everything a library should be. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable reading chairs, and sliding ladders to reach the highest shelves. Under different circumstances, Lily would have been ecstatic. "I'm sorry about my mother," Victor said once they were alone. "She can be overwhelming." Lily trailed her fingers along the spines of leather-bound classics. "She wants me to live here." "Yes," Victor admitted. "She does. And you?" Lily made herself look at him directly. "Do you want that too?" Victor seemed caught off guard by the directness of the question. He sat down in one of the leather armchairs, gesturing for Lily to take the one opposite him. "I think," he said carefully, "that I would like the opportunity to be your father, properly this time. But I also think Ms. Rivera is right. These things shouldn't be rushed." He leaned forward slightly. "Lily, I need you to understand something. When I made that comment at Oakwood about adopting anyone who could play the piano, I had no idea who you were. It was a thoughtless, cruel joke, and I'm deeply ashamed of it. But if I hadn't played," Lily said quietly, "you never would have known. You would have left, and we would never have met." Victor's face fell. "Yes, that's true, so it was just luck." "A coincidence, or fate," Victor suggested. "Your mother would probably have called it that. She believed in things like fate and destiny." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I never did. Until now, perhaps." Lily thought about this. "Ms. Rivera says I don't have to forgive you for leaving my mom, that I don't owe you anything." "She's right," Victor said simply. "You don't. But she also says people can change, that who you were then isn't necessarily who you are now." Hope flickered across Victor's face. "I'd like to think I've changed. Meeting you, knowing who you are, it's made me confront things about myself I've spent years avoiding." From the dining room came the sound of raised voices, Helen's cultured tones taking on a sharp edge, Ms. Rivera's normally calm voice rising in response. Victor winced. "Perhaps we should rescue your guardian. My mother isn't used to being contradicted." As they walked back to the dining room, Victor stopped suddenly, turning to Lily. "Whatever happens, whether you ever come to live here or not, I want you to know the piano lessons will continue. Your musical education is not conditional on anything else. That's a promise." Lily nodded, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. The piano, at least, was something solid and real in this new shifting landscape of her life. Whatever else changed, she would have the music, and for now, that was enough. Winter had settled over the city, dusting the grounds of Oakwood Children's Home with snow and painting frost patterns on the windows. 6 months had passed since the day Victor Harrington had mockingly challenged Lily to play the piano. 6 months that had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Today, Lily sat in her room at Oakwood sorting through her belongings. After months of meetings with social workers, court appearances, home visits, and countless conversations, the adoption was finally happening. Tomorrow she would leave Oakwood and move into the Harrington house permanently. Need any help? Dion asked, leaning against her doorframe. At 14, he was one of the few kids who had been at Oakwood even longer than Lily. I'm almost done, she replied, folding a sweater carefully into her suitcase. It's strange how little I actually have. Yeah, but now you'll have way too much stuff, Dion said with a grin. Rich people always do. Lily smiled, but her stomach was in knots. Despite the months of preparation, the reality of leaving Oakwood, the only real home she'd known for 7 years, was hitting her hard. Are you scared? Dion asked, his joking tone dropping away. Lily nodded, grateful that he'd asked the question directly. A little, maybe a lot. Makes sense, he said with a shrug. It's a big change. What if it doesn't work out? The question that had been haunting her for weeks finally slipped out. What if he changes his mind again? Dion considered this seriously. Well, then you'd come back here. And that would suck. But, he added, I don't think that'll happen. That guy looks at you like you hung the moon or something, especially when you play. Before Lily could respond, Ms. Rivera appeared in the doorway. Almost ready for the party? She asked. The staff had organized a small farewell gathering for Lily in the common room. Just about, Lily said, closing her suitcase. Most of her things would stay at Oakwood tonight. Victor would send someone to collect them tomorrow while Lily attended her final hearing at the courthouse. The common room had been decorated with streamers and a hand-painted banner that read, We'll miss you. Lily! A chocolate cake sat on the center table, surrounded by paper plates and cups of punch. Speech, speech. The younger children chanted when Lily entered. She shook her head, embarrassed by the attention, but Ms. Rivera gently pushed her forward. Just a few words, she encouraged. Lily looked around at the faces that had been her family for so long, the staff who had cared for her, the children who had been her brothers and sisters in all the ways that mattered. Her throat tightened. Thank you for the party, she began hesitantly, and for everything. Oakwood has been my home for so long, and all of you have been my family. She twisted her fingers together nervously. Even though I'm going to live somewhere else, that won't change. And I'll visit all the time, I promise. You better, called Mrs. Wilson, the house mother who had taught Lily to tie her shoes and braid her hair years ago. Don't you go getting too fancy for us now. Everyone laughed and the tension broke. The party continued with cake and games, and for a while, Lily was just another kid at Oakwood, laughing and talking with her friends. As the evening wound down, Ms. Rivera drew her aside. Can we talk for a minute? In my office? Lily followed her down the familiar hallway to the small room where they'd had so many conversations over the past months. On Ms. Rivera's desk sat a wrapped package. I have something for you, Ms. Rivera said, handing it to Lily. A going-away present. Lily carefully unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound photo album. Opening it, she gasped softly. The first page held a photograph she'd never seen before. A young Asian woman sitting at a piano, her expression intense and focused as her hands moved across the keys. Your mother, Ms. Rivera explained gently. I contacted the music school where she studied. They had some photos and programs from her performances. And this, she turned the page to reveal a newspaper clipping, is a review of one of her concerts. It mentions her extraordinary interpretation of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she turned the pages slowly. There weren't many photographs, just a handful of images showing her mother at different performances, one with a group of other musicians, another receiving some kind of award. But they were more than Lily had ever had before. I thought, Ms. Rivera continued, that as you start this new chapter with your father, you should have something to connect you to your mother as well. Thank you, Lily whispered, hugging the album to her chest. I'll treasure it forever. You know, Ms. Rivera said, settling into her chair, when Victor Heron first came to Oakwood, I never imagined we'd end up here. His joke was cruel and I was furious with him for it. She smiled slightly. But watching him work to earn your trust these past months, seeing how he's prioritized your feelings and needs even when his mother was pushing for a faster process. It's been remarkable. He's trying really hard, Lily agreed. The past 6 months had seen Victor at his best and worst. sometimes awkward and uncertain about how to be a father, sometimes frustrated when things moved too slowly, but always coming back, showing up, trying again. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Ms. Rivera asked. Lily thought about it. "I'm nervous, but also excited, I think." Is that weird? To be excited about living with someone who left me in the first place? Not weird at all, Ms. Rivera assured her. Families are complicated, and forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. You don't have to have everything figured out to move forward. "Will you visit me?" Lily asked suddenly. "After I leave Oakwood?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Ms. Rivera promised. "Besides, I'm still your court-appointed advocate for the next year. I'll be checking in regularly to make sure everything's going well." Lily nodded, relieved. Having Ms. Rivera as a bridge between her old life and new one made the transition less frightening. "Now," Ms. Rivera said, checking her watch, "you should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. Lily sat between Victor and Ms. Rivera in a wood-paneled courtroom, answering the judge's gentle questions about whether she understood what adoption meant and if she wanted Victor Harrington to be her legal father. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied, her voice small but steady in the formal space. The judge smiled at her over his glasses. "And Mr. Harrington, do you understand the responsibilities you're undertaking as a parent?" "I do, Your Honor," Victor replied. "Completely." The proceeding was brief but solemn. When the judge signed the final paperwork and announced that the adoption was official, Helen Harrington, sitting in the row behind them, let out a small, dignified sob. Outside on the courthouse steps, Victor knelt down to Lily's level, something he'd learned to do over the months when he wanted to have a serious conversation with her. "Well," he said, his usual confidence wavering slightly, "it's official. How do you feel?" Lily considered the question carefully. "Happy," she decided, "and still a little scared." "Me too," Victor admitted with a small laugh. On both counts, Helen joined them, drying her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. "The car is waiting," she announced, "and Cook has prepared a special lunch to celebrate." As they descended the courthouse steps, Lily spotted a familiar figure waiting near a taxi, Professor Chen, her piano teacher, holding a small wrapped package. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said with a bow to the group, "but I wanted to offer my congratulations." "You're always welcome, Professor," Victor assured him. "Will you join us for lunch?" The professor shook his head. "Another time, perhaps. But I brought a small gift for Lily." He handed her the package. "For the next stage of your journey." Inside was a book of sheet music, advanced pieces by Chopin, including several nocturnes. "When you're ready," Professor Chen told her with a smile. The Harrington house, her house now, Lily reminded herself, looked different today, somehow more intimidating yet also more welcoming. As they walked through the grand entrance hall, she noticed new photographs had been added to the walls. Pictures of her at the piano, one of her with Victor at the park, another with Helen at her first recital 2 months ago. "I thought we should update the family gallery," Victor explained, following her gaze. "Make it truly yours too." In the music room, the Steinway gleamed in the winter sunlight. Beside it stood something new, a smaller upright piano. "For your bedroom," Helen explained, noting Lily's confused expression. "So you can practice whenever you wish without coming all the way downstairs." "My bedroom has a piano?" Lily asked, stunned by the extravagance. "And a full bookshelf," Victor added. "But if there's anything else you want or need, you just have to ask." Later that evening, after a celebratory dinner where even Helen had relaxed enough to laugh at Victor's rare attempt at a joke, Lily sat alone in her new bedroom. It was 3 times the size of her room at Oakwood, with a window seat overlooking the gardens, a canopy bed, and, as promised, both a piano and a wall of books. On the bedside table she had placed the photo album Ms. Rivera had given her, open to a picture of her mother. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "May I come in?" Victor asked. Lily nodded and he entered carrying a small wooden box. "One last thing for today," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "This belonged to your mother." He handed her the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small charm in the shape of a piano. "I gave it to her after her performance the night we met," Victor said quietly. "She was wearing it in the hospital when you were born. After the accident, her grandmother, your great-grandmother, returned it to me. I think," I think she would want you to have it now." With gentle hands, he fastened the necklace around Lily's neck. The little piano charm rested just below her collarbone, cool against her skin. "Thank you," she whispered, touching it gently, "for keeping it all this time." "I kept very little," Victor admitted. "I tried to forget your mother, forget the choice I made. But this, I couldn't let it go." His voice grew husky. "Maybe some part of me knew I'd find you someday." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. "Victor?" Lily asked finally. She still wasn't comfortable calling him Dad. That might come with time, or it might not. He had told her he was fine with either. "Yes? Do you think she would be happy?" "About today?" Victor considered the question carefully, looking at the photograph of Grace Chen on the bedside table. "I think," he said slowly, "she would be furious with me for taking so long, for missing so many years." He smiled sadly. "But yes, I think she would be happy that we found each other in the end." Lily nodded, comforted by his honesty. "It's getting late," Victor said, standing up. "Big day tomorrow, too. Your new school wants you to audition for their advanced music program. Will you come with me?" Lily asked. "Try and stop me," he replied with a smile. "Good night, Lily." After he left, Lily went to the piano in her room. Softly, so as not to disturb anyone, she began to play the piece that had brought her here, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. As her fingers moved across the keys, she thought about the strange, winding path that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, a careless, cruel joke had changed her life. "If she plays the piano, I'll adopt her." Victor had jeered, never imagining she actually could, never imagining she was his daughter. Life was unpredictable that way, Lily thought. Sometimes the worst moments led to unexpected second chances. Sometimes people changed. Sometimes families found each other against all odds, and sometimes a girl who had practiced piano without making a sound could fill a house with music. Her mother's necklace gleamed in the soft light as she played, the small silver piano rising and falling with each breath. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the world in quiet white. Inside, the music continued, bridging past and present, loss and discovery, ending and beginning. Note by note, Lily played herself home.